Good evening, and welcome to this keynote address. Our speaker is Madati, Vice President and Global Head of Partnerships for Twitter. He will be speaking about how Twitter is evolving and stayed relevant by offering new opportunities of expression for its demanding audience. Before joining Twitter, Kay held senior positions at both Black Entertainment Television and more recently, Facebook. Today, with the help of moderator Kate Bulkley, a media commentator and UK journalist, Mr. Madati will be joined by a stellar group of media executives. They are Cohan, President of International and Digital Media for A&E Networks, Kelly Day, President of Viacom Digital Studios, and Lloyd, Director of Business Development, Strategic Partnerships and Investment for Sky. It promises to be a fascinating conversation, so feel free to retweet it. And now, please give a warm welcome to Twitter's Madati. Thank you, Cohan. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. So the content landscape continues to evolve. And at Twitter, we have become more than just a destination for informing our audiences. More increasingly, we have become the destination for premium content. And when we believe, when something happens in the world, it first happens on Twitter. When people have a moment that they want to share, or that they want to discuss around an event that's happening in the real world, it happens first on Twitter. And we've married that belief with the ability to partner with content providers around the world. Twitter has become the ultimate mobile platform where video and conversation come together. And today, I'm privileged to be up here on stage with some of our best partners who are going to show you exactly how that is iterating. So, without further ado, please welcome Lloyd from Sky, Cohan from A&E, Kelly Day from Viacom, and our moderator for today's session, the eminent Kate Bulkley.
Good afternoon. How are you all? Thank you for coming. I'm Kate Bulkley, as Kay said. I'm an independent media commentator in the state, by the way, at Kate Comments. That's my Twitter handle. This is a really interesting panel, and we're going to deep dive into some of these partnerships. Kay asked me to start and just sort of set the stage a little bit about my thoughts about the ecosystem and where we are with the TV ecosystem. It's a big subject, as you all know, but specific to this panel, I thought what I would say is that what we're seeing is what I would call a certain rapprochement, since we're in France, a rapprochement between social media and the traditional media. I think we've moved from sort of not knowing what they're doing or enemy to more frenemy, let's see how we can leverage working together, and that's a positive thing. I think that's probably because each side is starting to appreciate the other's skill set. Twitter has, as you know, 335 million monthly active users. It's a big platform. It's an incredibly fast tool to reach out to audiences. Traditional media companies, of course, see opportunities to engage with people on a different platform, and they're doing this with all social media platforms, not just Twitter. That said, obviously the battle for attention, the battle for share of wallet, is all ramping up, the battle for advertising. No wonder we're seeing consolidation, as you all know, big consolidation among the biggest media players. And in fact, we have one on stage with us today. Sky was just consolidated. It's a new verb, I guess, Emma, to be consolidated. Another big trend, of course, with social media is the scope for manipulation of these platforms. Obviously, the biggest problem, and for someone like me, it's very close to my heart, is fake news. There's also harassment, hate speech that can spread like wildfire. These are really important issues. We all know they are. It's causing a rethink, somewhat overdue in my mind, by the social platforms to combat this kind of content. this is definitely an evolving space. But I think the main point here, and particularly for this panel, is it's clear there's a lot of opportunity, there's a lot of space for partnerships among the media with Twitter. And I think it's great that we're here talking about what we can do that. Now, we've actually you've met Kay, and you've heard their names several times, so I'm not gonna dwell on that. You know that Emma's next to Kay, Emma Lloyd, Director of Business Development, Strategic Partnerships. Hello, Emma. Sean Cohan is next to Emma. He is President of International Digital for A&E. He tells me he runs all kinds of things. I didn't say what Emma does. Emma does strategic commercial partnerships, and she also does digital. She oversees digital across all the genres, right? Sports, news, et cetera. Sean is the president of International Digital, and I've never seen so many things he does. He basically runs the brands for History, Lifetime, Crime Investigation, A&E, and with the digital side, and that's pertinent to us today, he oversees D2C offers, apps, the websites, content production, licensing. I'm sure I've left something out. So that's what Sean does. And then next to me, we have Kelly Day. She's president of Viacom Digital Studios, which is actually quite a new unit of Viacom. It creates original and branded programming for the social mobile audience. She's about leveraging IP from their brands like MTV, Nickelodeon, Cartoon Central, Comedy Central. I knew I was gonna do that. As well as integrating the recently purchased Awesomeness, which of course is a company that she worked for. So that's our panel. And what we're gonna talk about today is we're gonna sort of start big picture and talk about what's happening in the landscape that's causing these companies to think about social and other platforms, and then what they're doing specifically with Twitter, and then a little bit of future gazing. So if we start with that, sort of the big picture, I'm gonna start with Kelly. The current environment surrounding TV and digital obviously is under intense pressure, as I've said. We've got a lot of moving parts. We have audiences fragmenting, or migrating to SVOD, we have social platforms. How are all of you moving to address these changes? And Kelly specifically, Viacom Digital Studios is less than a year old now, yes?
It's about a year old.
About a year old. Awesomeness, you've got that. Tell us a little bit about the vision that you have for this and how that's going to address where audiences are and where you want to find them today.
Yeah, I think, Viacom Digital Studios, as you mentioned, is just about a year old. And the vision when we created this was really, I think, to address what is a real need amongst media companies across the board, which is how do you authentically talk to audiences who spend literally all of their waking hours kind of scrolling through their phones, right? There's a tremendous amount of noise in the social media landscape. You're competing with not only traditional media partners, but also with individuals and individual content creators. And so what we really do is develop original IP and develop conversations and develop audiences around that IP that is, primarily distributed through these social and mobile platforms. And it's really about ensuring that brands like MTV and Comedy Central and Nickelodeon are really well positioned for the future. I don't think any of us really know where all of these business models are playing out, but at the end of the day, brands and IP win. And we want to make sure that our brands and our IP are positioned for the future and are positioned to be able to talk to young audiences.
Yeah, and also just remain relevant to young
Exactly.
audiences. Yeah. So Emma, let's go to you next. There's so many engagement options out there for audiences, not just young audiences, all audiences. How do they receive content? The Sky contest deal is obviously still fresh, so you probably can't tell us too much about what that's going to mean. But let's just say, when you look at your strategies going forward with how you deal with consumers and social and other channels, what do you see as the big moving tectonic plates?
So I think, interestingly, the two sort of important tectonic plates for us that are constant and have been constant really throughout the last, obviously, 10 years, and I think will continue to be, is that we are forever obviously striving to have the best content IP and content, and the stuff that we bring to our customers on screens, whatever screens it is, remains, I think, the heart of our business. But increasingly, and again, as a constant theme, the innovation that sits as part of that, and that enables us to bring to those customers, whether it's the latest in VR or AR, or whether it's our partnership with Twitter, which has been an important tool for us over the last 5 years, or whether it's the way in which we've augmented our own in-home entertainment system, Sky Q. For us, content and innovation are at the heart. Those two tectonic plates, they are going to continue to evolve, but they're not fundamentally changing. We work with big partners like Twitter and startups at the other end of the spectrum to make sure that we're not, getting behind the curve, that we are testing things sort of ahead of the curve and understanding what all aspects of our audience are going to want to do.
What's interesting about your role with looking at new things, like I know you've invested, for instance, in a VR company, Jaunt, which is actually pivoting now to be more AR.
Yeah.
You've invested in certain startups to kind of get a view on what's going on. So what's your next thing? What do you think's happening now in the landscape?
Well, as you say, one of the startups we invested in announced yesterday that they are pivoting more towards AR, away from VR. We actually at Sky are going to continue to invest in VR content as well. But in our portfolio at the moment, we've got some new really fascinating formats. Drone Racing League as a brand new sort of global entertainment format we think is a really interesting space, and we're doing a lot of work to support DRL. The AVOD space remains a really interesting one for us. We have a fantastic portfolio company called Pluto that's been incredibly successful in the US market. We've been working with them and watching them very closely, and they have just launched on Sky's Now TV platform in the UK this week.
And that's an AVOD service.
And that's an AVOD service. But
so that complements kind of what you're doing with Now TV. That's kind of a slightly different.
Yeah, so it's AVOD, but it actually feels very premium in the sense that they curate channels. They have, a very premium feel to the interstitials, and they attract premium ad dollars for that service as well. And
so you're always kind of looking ahead to things like that.
Well, it's about, as I say, our audiences have always consumed free content, ad-funded content, as well as premium. Obviously, the PSBs are very strong in the UK. I think in a digital world, players like Pluto have a really strong role to play on a global stage.
So Sean, when you look at this, what are the things that you see coming ahead? You have a lot of brands under your umbrella. You're juggling a lot of different plates. Where do you see the biggest opportunities? What do you see as moving out there?
Well, I'd go back to, it's always toughest going last, by the way, so I'll try and say something pithy. But content and brands for us are the keywords that kind of ring in my head. So for us, it's making great content, relevant content across platforms, and telling stories, and that's what we're all in the business of, and doing so hopefully in a way that resonates with, it reinforces, and obviously kind of syncs with the brands we have. I think for us, the biggest opportunities when we think about digital, I think amongst our brands, and I never like to favor one brand over another, it's a bit of like a Sophie's Choice, but history as a brand is one that has a tremendous, performs very well across platforms in terms of viewership, attention, users, et cetera. And we think has tremendous potential because it's like it's a tremendous space where in every market of the world, we do have the History Channel in every market in the world that local law allows it, but in every market in the world, there are A/B educated men and women who have a strong interest in history, not just kind of living history or World War II history, but history in a sense as trusted context around the news cycle.
So you see history as like one of the biggest brands, and obviously you say, you don't like to favor brands, but that history is one of the biggest brands you think actually has a lot of legs in this new environment.
Yeah, it does. So history, for example, history is the kind of brand that you can have. We've got a leading skill on Alexa that is this day in history. So Alexa, what happened this day in history? We have a history.com site in the US where 90% of the traffic comes organically around non-show topics. So when something goes wrong in Korea, there are a lot of people that ask the question, well, why are there two Koreas? And so literally we're the recipient of that. Or in the US, Second Amendment, there's a reference to, I think it's guns, right? But so it's to that. And so we're ultimately, I think have an embarrassment of riches in terms of opportunity or in terms of like potential interested people that need trusted context around the news cycle and what people are talking about. And so there, that's, we think, is a pretty darn big opportunity. It's something that we've scratched the surface on, but there's a lot to be done, both in the U.S. and abroad.
Interesting. Okay, so trusted context. I like that. So let's go to sort of what I've called sort of part 2 and talk about how you're working with Twitter, in different ways. You've all brought a little something to show us. Kelly, I'm going to start with you again. Viacom and Twitter, I think you've had a strong partnership across
we've
lots
been
of brands.
partners for many years. Kay was actually a Viacom alumni, so.
That's right. So
Fix
he knows
is
the
in.
inside story. Is that good or bad for dealing with the negotiation?
I think generally it's quite positive. I think it's quite positive. But we've had a long-standing partnership with Twitter. We obviously have a lot of accounts that are very active on Twitter. This last year, we've really focused our relationship with Twitter and a lot of our content investment in really trying to play to the platform. So one of our philosophies that is very ingrained in sort of how we think about Viacom Digital Studios is that you have to program to the platform, that it does not work in this environment to take a piece of content and just kind of spread it everywhere. And so with Twitter, our focus is really around the live experience and sort of what's daily and topical and very current, right? And so over the past month, we've been in the process of rolling out 4 daily news shows. The first was BET Breaks. The second was Comedy Central, a show called Extra Damn Day, which was a spinoff of another show that we have called Every Damn Day. And Extra Damn Day is really 5 comedians who kind of give their take on what's trending on Twitter today. And then we've got 2 others from MTV, one domestically and one international with MTV News.
So these are quite short, or how does this work?
It really varies based on how much there is to talk about on any given day. Some days, there's quite a lot in the news cycle to talk about. I think in the Trump environment, a lot of times there's a lot of stuff to talk about. But it really varies. So one of the probably most blessed things about digital and social platforms is we're not bound to a clock, right? It can be as short as a few minutes, as long as 10 or 12 minutes. But most of the current episodes, the live broadcasts have been relatively short, like 5, 6, 7 minutes. The great thing though is we're able to take the clips and cut them up into like 1-minute segments, and then we distribute them on Twitter throughout the day as well. And we do find that we get a lot of additional viewership out of those incremental distribution opportunities.
So that's your idea of actually looking at the platform and saying, oh, we've got to do it this way for this platform.
Yeah, I mean, this particular show, we only produce it for Twitter. And
Is it exclusive?
I think more and more that, yeah.
Good deal.
Yeah.
Sorry, more and more you're going to do exclusive.
I think it's less about structuring deals around exclusivity and more around the fact that we really believe that consumers do interact with these platforms in a very unique and bespoke kind of way. And so it is important as programmers that we really think about how the consumer is interacting with the platform and interacting with the content and develop unique content experiences that are well suited to it. And so I think this is a great example that we developed in partnership with Twitter.
Okay, let's look at Extra Damn Day. Great name.
Welcome to Extra Damn Day. These 5 comedians are going to talk about what's trending on Twitter.
Hashtag him too was
Oh, wow.
I can only imagine the embarrassment this guy feels.
yeah.
Because even at a party when my mom's like, Hannah, have you met Rick? I'm like,
Hope Hicks is trending.
Oh, I thought it was just old pics, like
course.
pigs.
Hicks?
Can we all agree that once you're dead, we stop celebrating your birthday?
Natasha wants to get rid of Martin Luther King Day.
It's so great that a straight white man has once again taken the voice out of my mouth. Hashtag every day when you're alive.
Cool.
Yeah, it's been great. I mean, we launched, so this is a very new format. We launched it, I think, a week ago Monday, so it's about 8 days old at this point. So I think.
How's it doing, Kay?
I think it's doing really well. And I actually think Kelly hit on something that is an important point. All 3 of them develop bespoke content for the platform for how audiences interact on the platform. This is not about taking a linear product and just putting it onto Twitter. This is about understanding that consumption and particularly video consumption on the platform happens in different ways, and having the production and the creative efficacy to bring it to bear in different ways. This is a great example.
Yeah, it's interesting, the exclusive per platform. Is there anything else you want to say about it? You don't?
No, I think, look, it's a living thing, right? So every day as we continue to see how the audience is responding to it, we can adjust the format as we go forward. We produce it in the studio. The team comes in the morning. They sort of see what's going on in the news cycle. They write it in the middle of the day, and they're basically shooting it in the afternoon. So it's a very responsive format.
That's fun. That's very Twitter-like.
That is.
And is there money to be made there, or?
Absolutely. We actually already have our first sponsor. So when we rolled out Extra Damn Day, we did it in partnership with McDonald's.
Okay, great.
So I think it's been very popular.
Emma, let's go to you. I think Sky and Twitter have also had a very long-standing partnership, yes?
Yes, over 5 years now.
5 years? Okay.
Friends at Twitter.
So what kind of things are you looking at? Is it revenue? Is it audience engagement? What are you trying to get?
So over the years, primarily, it's been around audience engagement. We see it as an incredibly complementary platform for us, for sports, for live sports and news. In recent years, the internal focus has slightly switched to also making sure that the platforms are on monetize, and actually Twitter is also very strong on that front as well, so whether it's sponsorship or the Amplify advertising deals that we do. And I think maybe partly because, again, as Kay has pointed out, our teams are creating packages that are bespoke for this platform. They also do work really well alongside a broadcast stream. Advertisers and sponsors over the years have grown to see actually how, good an outcome it is for them as well.
So the advertisers and sponsors like the fact that there's a linear broadcast at the same time as the Twitter feed, and they put their ads on both? Or?
So we run obviously both content in the live program. So one of our biggest successes so far, for example, has been the royal wedding, not the small one we had last Friday, but the slightly bigger one.
Oh, you mean the big one? Harry and Meghan, yes. Okay.
Yes, that one. Which actually, within Sky, at the exec level, I think blew everybody away in terms of how many people. We had a huge, over 12 million people
12 million people watched on Twitter?
Yeah.
Good heavens.
Which...
It's great.
Great, yes.
It was a fantastic
going, yes, good, very good. Have another royal wedding, big royal wedding.
So
I think we may have run out of those. We have to have royal christenings
royal
now.
baby.
So we had an American in the wedding somewhere, so that might have helped.
Yeah.
But, and they really sort of learned about how to start to use the live tools. But actually, we also much more regularly use it in terms of in-game football clips that are being cut in real time and posted onto the platform with commentary, and then the highlights.
And that's about engagement, really.
And that is about engagement, and it does drive people to tune in. Obviously, we've got Now TV, which is our OTT proposition, so we can drive people straight through to sign up. Okay. But it also enables people, obviously, to engage in the conversation and associate our brand with that and drive people back to watch.
Do you want to talk about the news bit, or should we run the clip now? What do you think?
Well, so the clip is a sports clip.
It's a sports thing? Okay, go ahead.
Spaniards in the audience.
So let's run the sports clip. This is how you engage with sport.
It's over Barkley's head. Unable to collect. Now Rashford, Sterling through the middle. No flag. Raheem Sterling! The long wait is over. It's his first ever England away goal. And it's given the supposed underdogs tonight a 16th minute lead.
So tell me they won that game.
3-2 win, apparently, so they tell me.
3-2-1, okay, good. So it wasn't just a useless goal, as I say.
No, it was great. And so, for us, obviously, the editorial team working in the studios on that night, obviously, they are choosing what to clip up and put on the platform. And yeah, it continues to work incredibly well for us and for advertisers and sponsors. And we work with on that one with the UK team And as you say, engagement is an important metric for us, but actually increasingly the revenue piece is there, and it is.
So the
also
revenue
important.
piece is growing?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So Kay, let me ask you just a question, because I know that you sort of recently shifted to a regional first structure. Is that something that's helped you talk to clients?
Yeah, I think as we've gotten more mature in the content space, it's become absolutely clear that while we have global brands that we work with, the NBA or the NFL or things like that, or Formula One, that it necessitates actually having a team and organizational structure at Twitter that can work directly with partners in the markets and develop the partnerships and the content deals that bring a lot of this content to bear locally. So
that's kind of what Emma was talking about, right? She works with the UK Twitter team.
That's absolutely right. Look, there are three key value propositions any one of these partners and anyone out in the audience might want to work with Twitter. Number one, we have a truly engaged and influential audience. We're not a lean-back platform, we're a lean-forward platform. People are engaged and want to share, comment, and ignite and participate in a conversation around a piece of content. Number two, you extend your reach as a linear provider. So you take some IP that may have a linear component, like a football game, create some complementary, whether it's clips or live content on Twitter. You marry those two things together, and all of a sudden you have the reach of our engaged audience on our platform. And last and foremost, and then arguably maybe the most important part, you can make money on all of it. Like we run advertising and sponsorship around all of this content. We work out what the deal structure is between us and the partner, and then you can take it to market. I think that this is how users and audiences are consuming content and interacting on content. We see it around the world's biggest events, whether it's the World Cup, whether it was Paris Fashion Week last week. I mean, you saw the clip.
Or the royal wedding.
Or the royal wedding. Or the royal wedding. The numbers scale. The deals are coming together in ways that are beneficial to our partners in ways, and it presents Twitter as a true partner in the space. We're not out here to compete with our linear and our broadcasting companies. We're out here to complement you and extend your reach and value proposition for your audiences and your advertisers.
So Sean, you've just heard him say that he's not trying to compete with you, he's trying to extend your relationship with your audience. I mean, how has A&E been working with Twitter?
Yeah, I think historically we've worked largely in a kind of audience engagement marketing kind of a way, so actually very consistent with what Twitter, with what Kay was saying. Recently, delightfully, we've also recognized what some of us have said before now, and in spades, that the audience's expectations and the identity of those audiences really differ very much so by platform, as do the monetization opportunities. And I'm happy to report, not just because I'm up on a Twitter panel, that Twitter is fairly unique in its approach to in a number of ways to help us monetize, in this case, history. History is a brand and history content. So first, I referenced earlier trusted context around the news. Well, and I'm talking about the difference of the Twitter audience. Well, disproportionately, audiences come to Twitter for the timely, for their news. I'm not saying it's the only platform for news, but it's one of the reasons why if we all come to Twitter a number of times a day, you come because there's timely discussion and news.
Oh, they break news. They break news all the time.
Around things. And so what better place for us to produce some content to give some drill down possibility or context and storytelling around that news. We're never going to be a news service, but again, it's the context around a moment. So our latest partnership is just about us producing, in this case, video context around moments in women's history. Very topical for now. It should have been topical for a long time, but very topical right now. And I think it's the audience expectation of news, it's the tremendous reach of Twitter, and it's also, to the monetization point, it's a diversified client base and a proactive, capable advertising sales team that enables us to, and a flexible partnership approach that enables us to work well with Twitter.
And does it happen all by algorithm? I mean, do you, like when something happens that's related to women in history or something, suddenly, we get the history tweet comes up and says, hey, if you want to know more.
Well, hopefully, we like to think, whether it's Twitter or other platform or our own owned and operated sites, we're doing a bunch of things that we think are, will be topical, that, for example, Korea's been in the news forever, like outside of the women's space for a second. Korea's been in the news forever, or in the U.S., protest before sporting events during the anthem has been in the news for a while. So we have that. We have we're doing a little bit of predicting, editorial predicting for what people will be talking about 3, 6, 9, 12 months from now.
Sure.
So there is that there, but there is also, and Kelly alluded to this a lot more elegantly than I could, there's also the real-time nature or the very short turnaround nature of digital production. So yeah, there are situations where we recognize a moment and can turn around short, cheap and cheerful short or not so cheap and cheerful short form around that moment.
Right, okay. Should we see your tape now?
Sure.
Okay, let's run the tape.
I think that's a plant.
Is that the A&E
Yeah, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that's a plant, but thank you, we'll take it anyway.
You guys didn't get organized. Where's the sky section?
Clearly.
Where's the
So that bit, for example, so not a news moment per se, but in the U.S., Halloween, and in some other markets, Halloween, as big a deal as it is, it's just framing around, we get a ton of traffic to our site around Halloween, and so just, in advance, preparing that. That was thanks to the Twitter team. That is part of a series of pieces that's sponsored by Gillette Venus. Around women's history, women's kind of moments.
Now, you've only just started working with Twitter.
That's right. Well, I should, as I said at the outset, we've worked with them for a long time on marketing and engagement things, but on a kind of more targeted content and in particular history, fairly recent, about 6 months or so.
And are you, it's only been 6 months, so time to tell, but how are you finding it so far? Are you liking the monetization part? Are you liking the engagement part?
Yeah, it's very early, but yeah, as I was saying at the outset, I probably wouldn't be up here. But if I didn't, but no, we like it a lot. Again, the audience, the kind of expectation when people go to the platform, the reach of the platform, the advertising capability, or and the willingness. Yeah, it's been a good experience.
So, what do you all think? Sort of about the future. Let's do a little crystal ball gazing. When you look, and I'm gonna come to Emma first, I think. When you look forward, what do you think we need to be thinking about what is Sky thinking about in terms of where it needs to be, I don't know, in terms of social, or how much content it's making for these kind of digital platforms, or where do you sort of see read the tea leaves for us a little bit going forward? What do you think are the big opportunities with social?
So I think, purely from a digital perspective, I think, I'm expecting to see more of our customer base shifting to our pure digital products. I'm expecting to see our sort of traditional products become more flexible and more digital-like. And I'm expecting us to continue to partner with, with the social platforms. And I think that both us and the social platforms are getting better at thinking about actually what is the right mix. And for us, on some platforms, that's pulling back a little bit. And on others, it's pushing further in. So,
you wouldn't want to name who you're going to pull back from.
No.
No. Okay. That's interesting. I think you're right. Particularly when we look at what's going on with pay TV companies around the world, D2C products and being more digital and all that. So that's clearly a good place to be thinking about. Sean, what do you think? What do you think is going?
Well, I think it's implicit. Like all of us, if we knew where the future was going, then we probably wouldn't say, or we'd be on our own island. But, or at least I would.
You would, yeah. Right.
I would. But with that said, that aside, I think the future for us, we think about a future where there are linear channels. Like linear channels won't disappear completely, and there will be room for, I won't call it quite lean back experience, but a different, less, interactive in terms of programming kind of or choice kind of experience. But like Emma was saying, it's a future where increasingly viewership, consumption of content is happening, wherever. And I won't do the cliche wherever, whenever, all of that. But I think it's incumbent upon all of us, and I think you've kind of heard viewpoints from all of us, which says, hey, we need to tell different stories in different places or in different ways, but we need to, as brands and content players, be, telling those stories in, be very present in all of those places and be thinking carefully long-term about how we make a business out of it. Now, in the short term, that's a real riddle. The where, how these business models kind of evolve and how to manage the inherent conflicts between different kind of channels or routes. But long term, I think we're buoyed, and I'll shut up in a second, I promise. I think we're buoyed by the idea that we're in an industry where the demand for video is going up. The minutes spent on video is going up year after year, bounded only by sleep. And even then, sleep is decreasing, sadly, for all of our healths. So, people want more of our content, all of our content, and it's really incumbent upon us to find interesting, innovative, as Emma said, ways to deliver that content and hopefully in the future monetize it optimally.
Yeah. So Kelly, what do you think? I mean, basically, I think you'd probably agree that content is important, and that's kind of the key. I think you said at the beginning, it's content, it's IP. Those are the things that are sort of the engines for companies, particularly like Viacom. Are there any sort of rough patches that you see going forward, or anything that you're concerned about? I mean, people say if we don't control the data from all this stuff, it's going to be a big problem, for example. I mean, what do you see as the things ahead?
Viacom is in the business of knowing young people, right? Like at the end of the day, the DNA of our company is really understanding youth culture and pop culture and sort of how young people think and operate. And so, when I think about sort of where things are going and maybe where some of the landmines are, I look at like the awesomeness audience, for example, or I look at my own teenage daughter and I think about how she consumes content. And kids are incredibly savvy about navigating the digital landscape, right? I used to hear people talk a lot about content discovery and how discovery was such a problem. And at one point I said, it's only a problem if you're old. Like, if you're a young person, you immediately know what is cool, who's watching what. They share passwords, they share everything, and they can find a show, whether it's on Netflix, Amazon, linear television, Facebook, you name it, they can find it. Yep. And so I think the risk in the future, and something that I think about every day, and I think everyone who is sort of in this business of creating content needs to think about, is that your brand needs to continue to really matter to audiences, and the IP that you're creating, you need to continue to own that IP, you need to be an engine of IP, and to your point about the data, I think that goes back to the audience piece, which is anytime someone else is in between you and your audience, there is a risk of being disintermediated. And so I really do think that, obviously the landscape's going to continue to get fragmented. Obviously, eyeballs are shifting into AVOD and SVOD and all of these other models. But at the end of the day, brands and IP are at the core of how you have to win in this environment.
Great. So Kay, I'm going to give you the last word. Where is Twitter going with content now? What's the future?
Yeah, what's the future look like? I think the external narrative is about the disruptors, which Twitter is maybe put on that side of the fence, versus the disrupted, which these media companies are. But I think we're actually living what the future is going to look like. I absolutely, wholeheartedly believe that these two worlds come together, form new business models, form new content production mechanisms and production facilities, figuring out how to do things quicker, faster, cheaper to distribute in a multi-platform, multi-device world. Like if companies like the ones that we're on stage with, but like some of the many ones that people in the audience work for as well, aren't thinking about how to stretch this new muscle and figure out how to engage audiences, build fandom and communities around the content in the multi-platform distributed world, you'll lose. So I think we're testing out what the future looks like right now, and I think I'm excited about scaling it in the future.
And just one last question from me, because I think it's important for this audience. Are you going to get into the business of content creation yourself, or do you want to work with partners?
Our position at Twitter is that these guys are the expert at content production, and we're great at being a distribution and monetization partner. I'm not as good at it as they are.
Well, they'll all take great satisfaction in that. I think that's good. It's probably a good note to end on. I think it's this is a very, as you say, it's a very interesting time. We're actually watching some of these things play out as we speak.
Right.
Thinking about how, what's the future for channels? How are we dealing with the future for distribution? Is it about digital only? How do we look at this landscape? And it's what Kelly says. It's really all about IP, owning that IP, and controlling your brand. And I think it's been a very illuminating session to hear from you all. So thank you all for listening. And could you please join me in thanking our panel, Kay, Emma, Sean, and Kelly. Thank you very much.
Thank you.